Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang as he watched and waited till his belly boiled. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Down came a jump up to drink at the water hole. Up jumped the swag man and grabbed him with glee. And he sang as he stowed him away in his tucker bag. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang as he stowed him away in his tucker bag. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Down came the squatter riding on his thoroughbred. Down came policeman 1, 2, 3. Where's the jolly jumbuck you got in your tucker bag? You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Where's the jolly jumbuck you got in your tucker bag? You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me.
The first leg of our vacation is a non-stop flight from LA to Melbourne. We checked in 5 hours early in LA, no line, and had time for a leisurely dinner at the space-like Encounters restaurant at LAX airport. But our flight is delayed. Sue and Leslie killed time by playing Phase 10. The airplane is brand new, only 2 weeks old, a Boeing 747-400 series operated by Qantas. We flew coach, which was not too bad for a scheduled 15-hour and 20-minute non-stop flight. Right. However, the storage area was convenient and each seat had its own personal entertainment system. From the menu, you had a choice of 6 full-length movies, games, TV shows, and a flight path. On the plane we had a dinner, attempted to sleep through the night, and had a breakfast in the morning. When we finally broke through the clouds, we got our first glimpses of Australia, and it was breathtaking. Our plane landed at Melbourne International Airport 1 hour and 10 minutes early to help offset our late departure. We got through customs okay, except for that cute little quarantine dog picking out my carry-on bag. All 4 of us piled into a taxi to take us to our hotel. Our room was not ready, so we walked across the street to tour the Melbourne Central Mall. And ate lunch while viewing the Australian Open on a huge TV. A very large Seiko pocket watch was one of the attractions in the mall. Finally, our rooms were ready after a few more free drinks at the bar. Both of our rooms were on the top floor and we had a great view overlooking Chinatown. Melbourne uses streetcars as the major backbone of its transportation system. Bicycles are also a favorite means of getting around town. Our rooms include a free breakfast each day at a nearby street cafe. We had breakfast outside on the sidewalk every morning. From our hotel, it was a 20-minute walk to Melbourne Park, where the Australian Open is played. We started off by walking down Swanston Street, where there are several street sculptures. Here's one that Bob is posing for. At the end of Swanston Street is Federation Square, an artsy collection of restaurants and shops in a far-out modern motif. From there, we walk along the Yarra River. In the background is the spire of the Victorian Arts Centre. This is one of Melbourne's distinctive landmarks. The walk along the river is in the peaceful setting of a public park. Melbourne Park has 2 large stadiums, one named after the Australian great Rod Laver, and the other named after a phone company, Vodafone. Most of the marquee matches are played in the Rod Laver Arena, where we had reserved seats for every day. However, many matches are played on outside courts that you can walk right up and watch. In the center of the tennis facility, there is a large gathering place where fans can socialize, relax, and have a choice of several food stands. One of my favorites was the genuine Aussie barbecue. If you don't have a ticket for the Rod Laver Arena, you can eat your lunch and watch it here on a giant TV screen. This area also had bands and street performers. This is an Australia Betty Boop, I think. And then there are the occasional players that walk by. Now let's go inside Rod Laver Arena to watch some tennis up close and personal. Back out on the grounds, Bob and I relax over a beer or two at the Heineken Beer Gardens. Our tennis tour included a day at a local park to play tennis down under. We played with other members of our tour group. This was the only day the wind blew smoke in from fires in nearby cities. The surface was a combination of astroturf mixed with sand. Here is Sue running down the ball and making a winner. Par for the course for her. Here's our team photo of our tennis group tour, with Kirsten, our tour guide, in the red Mickey Mouse shirt. We had a farewell dinner with our tennis group. One day, Bob and myself left the tennis early to witness the Ferry Penguin Parade. This was about 1.5 hour bus ride out to Phillips Island. The Australian Conservation Authority does not allow any videos or photos to be taken. These unique little penguins only come out from the sea at dusk to make their 1/4 mile walk to their burrows. They have stands set up and boardwalks for visitors to watch this spectacular slice of nature. One day, before going to the tennis, we went on a riverboat cruise on the Yarra River. Yar is an Aboriginal word meaning upside down river. This is because the water is muddy on the top and clear on the bottom. The Yarra River flows east along the south banks of Melbourne. This pickup sticks landmark marks the entry of the concert hall. The river always seems to have rowers practicing for some upcoming event. This is the only bridge in the world that was built entirely by women, and, oddly enough, it's still standing. We're cruising down the same banks that we walked every day to get to the tennis matches. This is Vodafone Arena, one of the Australian Open stadiums, next to the Melbourne Cricket Grounds, MCG as it's better known, and the Rod Laver Arena. As we float down the river, Melbourne fades in the distance. The next stage of our vacation is a trip to the northwest coast of Australia. There are no direct flights from Melbourne to Cairns, so we had to change planes in Sydney. The Sydney flight was only 1 hour long. We flew on a colorful 747 to Cairns. This was a 2.5-hour flight. The flight attendants were so talkative and friendly, as well as all the Australians we've met. We met one flight attendant that spent 30 minutes telling us the exciting activities to do when we get back to Sydney. When we arrived at the airport, we heard Bob Key's name over the PA system. I was thinking that poor Bob and Leslie had gotten their luggage lost. As it turns out, they only lost Bob's and mine. The ladies lucked out again. In Cairns, we stayed at the luxurious Tradewinds Esplanade, directly on the water. When you check in, they put a personalized welcome message on the TV screen. The bathroom was very nice, and the room key interlocks the lights and TV so they're not on when you're not in the room. Bob and Leslie came by to relax after a long flight. This is the view out our hotel window of the pool below, with the palm trees waving in the breeze and the ocean in the background. Cairns is a small town in tropical North Queensland and is the gateway to Australia's tropical islands, the outback, and the rainforest. Here is Bob at breakfast, shading his face by skewing his beloved Australian Open hat. That night we had one of our best meals at Barnacle Bill's, where we both had kangaroo and crocodile, which surprisingly wasn't too bad. Today is our excursion to the Great Barrier Reef. We take a bus ride from Cairns to Port Douglas. Most of the Great Barrier Reef adventures start off from Port Douglas. From here we take a catamaran to the outer reef. At Port Douglas, we board the Quicksilver Wave Piercer. These high-speed Wave Piercer pontoons effortlessly cut through the water as the boat glides over the ocean. You can enjoy the ride either inside in modern furnished decor or go outside on one of the decks. Here is Sue on the stern enjoying the fresh ocean breeze as the turbulence of the powerful wake is below her. Now she moves to the front observation deck where the ocean breeze is slightly stronger. If she doesn't hold on her head tight enough, she will lose it. After 1.5 hours of cruising at 35 knots, we arrive at the outer limits of the Great Barrier Reef. Here the Wave Piercer docks up to a huge ocean platform where all of our day's activities will originate. In the summer months, there is a danger of marine stingers. One type, called a box stinger, is most interesting. If it stings you and you don't drown, the poison will kill you in about 7 minutes. As a result, they had no trouble renting the blue stinger-proof suits for $5 a head. From the platform, you can take a helicopter ride to view the sharks, visit an underwater observatory, depart in a submarine, ride in a glass-bottom boat, feed the fish, book a guided snorkeling or scuba tour, and of course, swim at your leisure. We decided to all snorkel together and explore the natural beauty of the coral and the marine life. The salt water provides enough buoyancy to effortlessly keep you afloat. Bob and Leslie took a glass-bottom boat and a submarine ride as Sue and I went scuba diving. I never thought I could talk Sue into actually going scuba diving with me. On the boat on the way out there, we had a scuba training class, and I was sure that would be enough to scare her. But no, she was a trooper and continued with the underwater training. They had a platform underwater for us to go through all the required safety procedures. Here is Sue attempting to equalize the pressure in her ears. You hold your nose and blow with your mouth closed until the pain goes away. It does not work if air comes out of your mouth, and if you continue to descend, your brain starts to come out your ears. Boy, does that hurt. After a while, you get the hang of the pressure relief and you can start enjoying the scenery. After we completed our scuba test, we headed off on the ropes from the platform. Sue is still working on that pressure equalization thing. The underwater color of the sea life is spectacular. Down the ropes we go. Notice the school of barracudas. We pause here for our instructor to go up to the surface to equalize his ears. This can even happen to an expert that has made thousands of dives. We finally reach the end of our rope, and then the instructor checks our air supplies. Now we all hold hands as we venture out underneath the sea. As you might notice, my weight belt is sinking me lower than the others. The quantity and the colorfulness of the fish is just incredible. It looks like these fish came directly out of my saltwater aquarium. And then there are the sharks. Fortunately, this one is minding its own business and leaves us alone. The clownfish is the only fish species that can coexist with the sea anemone. This tomato clown does not hurt the anemone, and in turn, the anemone doesn't harm it. The sea anemone protects itself by injecting very fine barbs with poison that will kill any other fish. The instructor makes us touch the anemone so we can feel the barbs. However, the barbs do not penetrate the skin, so it does not kill us, just stings a little. I take a photo of the videographer diver and the plaque that explains how the clownfish and the sea anemone live together. Our videographer shoots a sea turtle making his way up the coral. This is a rare Australian dragonfish. As you probably notice, a very large grouper has been stalking us. He's been following us the entire time. He sneaks up from behind us, and we ignore him. But finally I swim over to tell him to leave us alone. My weight belt still keeps me dragging along. Next, our instructor shows us a huge clam. It closes up and he makes us feel the inside edge. It has a rubbery texture. As we enjoy our dive, we encounter many varieties of sea life. However, we stay clear of the moray eel. We make our way back up the ropes to the platform. As we surface, Sue has a tremendous look of relief that it's finally over and that she had survived.
Hi, it was a lovely day having you down there, and hopefully come back one day.
Thanks.
Welcome.
The next day was a heritage experience in the village of Kuranda. We took a scenic Skyrail cableway above the rainforest canopy from outside Cairns to Kuranda. The Skyrail has 3 stops to allow you to explore the rainforest on your way to Kuranda. The entire cable ride is 4.7 miles and takes about 1 hour for a one-way trip. The first stop is Red Peak Station. The vegetation is heavy like you would expect in a rainforest with very tall trees. We got back into the Skyrail, and off in the distance is the Kuranda Scenic Train that we will take back to Cairns. This is the highest point in the cableway, 133 feet above the ground. We next get off at Barron Falls Station to take a peek at Barron Falls. Here are some active large ants. We get back onto the Skyrail for the last stop, which is Kuranda. We arrive at the small village of Kuranda and browse the local shops. The ladies can't resist the beat of the music coming from a local cantina.
Go, girls, go. Come on, go.
Okay, that's enough.
We take a shuttle bus to the Rainforest Station. The first stop here is a guided tour of the wildlife park. These are barramundi, the jumping fish. I had one for dinner the other night and it was very tasty. Here is Jack the Ripper, as he is fondly known. The wildlife park attempted to get him a mate several times, but he mistakenly thinks his bride is his lunch. Over several years they went through 12 female crocs until they finally gave up on the matchmaking. The wildlife park has several interesting lizards. Here's one with 2 heads.
This is Basil, and Basil's a really friendly koala most of the time. Koalas do get moody though, and when he's had enough, no doubt he'll let me know. Now, as I come around and you give him a bit of a pat, you'll notice a bit of a smell about him. That is the koala, it's not me.
Yeah, right.
Koalas do smell a bit. Now, if you have a look on his chest here, that's where the smell's coming from. You can see the oily patch there, the dirty mark on his chest. That's a scent gland made to mark his territory, just to say that that tree's his and for no other male koalas to go.
These little guys are wallabies, and they look like tiny kangaroos. Now these are real kangaroos, the first time we've seen live kangaroos. Aren't they so cute? Leslie and Sue attempt to get close enough for a photo op. but are concerned about the possibilities of a kangaroo attack. Next to the wildlife park is the amphibious Army Duck Adventure. These Army Ducks were made in the US of A. As you can see, the steering wheel is on the left side. When it rains, it pours in the rainforest. At the bottom of the trail, we take the fork to the right, directly into the river. No worries, mate, it's amphibious. As we cruise along the river, we come across some other Army ducks. Next was the Pamagiri Aboriginal show. After the show, we went over to throw boomerangs. Sue gets off a solid throw, but it doesn't return. Leslie has a frown on her face, but gives it a try anyway. When I was a kid, I successfully threw boomerangs hundreds of times. I was overconfident and threw it too far as it hit the tree before it could return. Bob, who has never thrown a boomerang in his life, gets off a perfect toss. It makes a 360-degree trek and gently lands on the roof behind us for a great crowd pleaser. This spear demonstration just shows how accurate these Aboriginal hunters were. They attach an extension pole for lengthening the moment arm, which greatly increases the spear's range. Here is Leslie and Sue posing again for the camera. We take the scenic Karanda train back to Cairns. Out the window is beautiful scenery, but Leslie and Sue would rather play Phase 10.
Sue's typical hand.
Down below are some rafters enjoying a river float. On the way back, we get close to a waterfall or two as we take the 1-hour ride back into Cairns. The next day, we go on a 4-wheel safari deep into the Daintree rainforest and a visit to Cape Tribulation. This large vehicle is not amphibious, but it can traverse small streams. After a morning stop for tea, we continue into Daintree National Park. We come to the end of the road and take a cruise on the wildlife-infested Daintree River. The river is peaceful and relaxing as we sit back and enjoy the scenery. All of a sudden, the boat skipper slows down and heads towards the shore. He spotted a crocodile from several hundred feet away. As we continue downstream, you can sense the excitement in the skipper's speech. This time we come across a 12-foot crocodile feasting on a pig. The boat drops us off on the other side of the shore, where we meet up with our four-wheel drive vehicle, which took the ferry across the river. The safari continues on this island that does not have any electrical service. When it starts to rain in the rainforest, it comes alive. Just listen to how loud nature gets. This mushroom smells like rotten meat to attract flies that get caught in its net, and then it absorbs the fly. We stopped for a barbecue lunch out in the middle of nowhere, and it was pretty good. The food was brought in just for us. After lunch, we take a hike into the rainforest. The tour guide patiently waits for us to catch up.
When I came back from Europe, my wife said I have a video camera surgically removed and have it really sharp. It's one of the major reasons why Tarzan makes the noise that he does when he goes through the rainforest. Yeah, that's true.
We continue to walk through the jungle, passing running streams and thick vegetation with the occasional deadly spider.
Gippy means bloody bad, excuse the English. It's true. They've got little hairs on them. Just tiny little hairs. They're actually made out of silicon glass. They're hollow, they've got acid inside them. You touch them, it's in your hand, the acid passes into your hand, and you're in pain. Not a little bit of pain, lots of pain. And it lasts for several weeks. Eventually the pain disappears slowly, but it grows a little bit bigger than that, but not much. That's pretty close to full size.
There was one fatal case of gibby. Someone out in the bush used this leaf for toilet paper. Boy, that's gotta hurt. In this tree, you can see 3 epipods. These are miniature ecosystems living in a host tree. A pepper vine is strangling this tree. This vine wraps around the host tree, and as the host tree grows, the pepper vine moves closer to the top of the rainforest canopy. Eventually, the pepper tree will kill the host, and it continues up by clinging on the next tree. A very rare and protected bird, the cassowary, roams in this area, and there are warning signs on the streets where one has crossed before. At this particular location, a speed hump sign was also posted, and a local decided to make a funny. As we go deeper into the rainforest, the streams get wider to cross. Here we take a look at some termites. At the top of the tree is a termite's nest. The ladies take cover in the vehicle, while us real men are out in the rain. Finally, we reach the northern coast of Cape Tribulation. As with many beaches on the northwest coast of Australia in the summer months, stingers are a major concern. You can only swim in designated areas that are netted off to keep the marine stingers out. This is a view of the secluded Cape Tribulation looking out over the Coral Sea. We each take turns taking each other's photos with Cape Tribulation in the background. On the way back to the ferry, we stopped by the side of the road to see thousands of large fruit bats. These trees are full of them. The ferry is cable-driven and goes across the Daintree River once per hour. It only takes a few minutes to traverse the river, and off we go. On the way back, we made a stop at an isolated roadside ice cream stand. Today, it is one scoop of blueberry, mango, waffle seed, and hazelnut. It's my turn to ride in the co-pilot seat, and I convinced the driver, Ralph, to stop at Rex's Lookout. This is another spectacular ocean view and ends our stay in Cairns. The next leg of our vacation took us back to Sydney for 3 days. The flight was non-stop and took 2.5 hours. Sydney is a huge metropolitan city. We stayed at the All Seasons Premier Menzies. This is an older hotel, but still very nice. This is our view out of our hotel window overlooking Wynyard Station. This was the smallest room we've had so far in Australia. We visit the famous Queen Victoria Mall the first day in Sydney. In 1893, Queen Victoria Mall was originally developed to be a massive fresh produce market. After several restorations, the last one converted to an upscale shopping mall commanding some of the highest retail rents in Sydney. It has 5 levels and over 100 high-end shops. The Circular Quays is one of Sydney's premier harbors. It encompasses the famous Opera House, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and the Rocks. The Rock District gets its name from the prisoners who originally occupied this area. This area is filled with restaurants, bistros, famous old pubs, souvenir shops, markets, and entertainment. A very popular attraction is the Sydney Harbour Bridge Walk. It takes 3.5 hours and costs $140 per person, and you better not be afraid of heights. The next day we took a luncheon harbor cruise on a large ship with 4 decks from the Captain Cook Cruise Line. Here's the view of the Sydney Opera House from over the water. The Opera House has 5 separate theater halls for performances, as well as several restaurants and bars. This is a view overlooking Farms Cove with the city skyline in the background. After lunch, we moved to the top observation deck for a better view of the harbor. We passed by Wallumaluma Bay with several sailboats in the marina. We waited for the boat to be properly aligned so the Sydney Towers and the Opera House framed our picture. The cruise left us off at Darlington Harbour, where the major cruise ships dock. From here, we took a tour of Sydney on a bus. One of the stops was Bondi Beach. There was rumors that the public beaches in Australia were topless, so of course we had to check it out. As you can see, the beach is crowded and full of children. Therefore, the women are discreet and only have their tops off when they're sunbathing. The next day, we all went on a Blue Mountain Explorer, except for Sue, who went back to the Queen Victoria Mall for some more shopping. I guess looking at rocks and trees couldn't compete with the shopping opportunities she would have had in a big city like Sydney. This is Gover's Leap. Many years ago, a famous forest ranger leaped off this cliff while still on his horse, plunging hundreds of feet to their deaths. The Blue Mountains gets its name from the blue haze produced from a reaction with the oil in the eucalyptus leaves and the moisture in the air. Once upon a time, there was 3 beautiful sisters who fell in love with 3 handsome warriors. Unfortunately, the sisters and warriors were from different competing tribes. A war broke out between these tribes, and a witch doctor from the sisters' tribe decided to protect the sisters from being kidnapped. To conceal them, he put a spell on the sisters to turn them into stone, and after the war he would restore them back to their original beauty. What they didn't count on was the witch doctor was killed in the war, and now the sisters are locked into stone forever. However, even today, if you look closely enough, you can still make out the three sisters embedded in the rock. There are two ways to get to the bottom of this canyon, also known as the Australian Grand Canyon. One way is to walk down the 900-step trail to the bottom. We took this hike. This was very scenic, and Bob took many pictures. The steps were made out of rock, wood, and in some places a steel ladder was used where the area was steep. The entire walk took us only 35 minutes. The second way is to ride the scenic Rider cable train. This goes through tunnels and a dense forest. This is a much faster way down, and the entire scenic ride took only a minute or two. On our way back from the Blue Mountains, we stopped at the Featherdale Wildlife Park. Here we got to see the famous rare bird, the cassowary, that in Cairns was such a big deal. This friendly guy is an Australian pelican. Right next to him is the sacred ibis. We saw many ibis in Cairns. Remember this bird? We saw him on the shoreline of the Daintree River on our four-wheel safari in Cairns. Here is the wacky emu. He walks loose, following people all around. Here he is trying to get Bob's attention, but Bob doesn't want any part of him. Leslie gives the bird the cold shoulder, and it works. Here's another animal we saw on the safari in Cairns. These are the large fruit bats that were hanging from the trees. This is what a Tasmanian devil looks like. This koala is perfectly balanced in his tree. Here we are getting our pictures taken with a cute little koala. This is something you don't see every day. Leslie with an olive python over her shoulders. Leslie shows no fear as a snake roams around. I had to try it too. However, when it was Bob's turn, the snake got a little more aggressive. Listen in.
Oh, that's cool. He's got his neck. I can't breathe. He can still breathe. Around his scrawny little neck.
That's pretty short.
After the zoo, we met Sue for dinner at La Mara, a fine Italian restaurant at the Rocks. The night view across the harbor was spectacular and ended our stay in Sydney and Australia. This is my first time in the Southern Hemisphere, and of course one of the very first things I wanted to see is if water drains out of the sink in the opposite direction than it does here in the Northern Hemisphere. The premise is that the Coriolis forces are caused by the Earth's rotation and influences the rotation of large weather systems down to your bathtub. Therefore, when you're in the Northern Hemisphere and the direction of flow is downward, like in a sink, and the viewpoint is from the top looking down, the water should twirl in a counterclockwise direction. And of course, if you go to the Southern Hemisphere with the same conditions, the water should rotate in a clockwise direction. Well, I was disappointed to find out that the direction the water rotated appeared to be random and did not follow the Coriolis forces. As shown here, the water in Melbourne is draining in the expected way, clockwise, but the water in Sydney drained in a counterclockwise direction. I got the same results when I tried it in Tucson, and the water drained in either direction. The reason turned out to be straightforward, and that is that Coriolis forces are way too small to influence the rotational direction of small, short-lived systems, like a draining sink, and not like hurricanes. For example, the Earth rotates once per day. That is an angular velocity of 0.00069 revolutions per minute versus a typical sink of 30 revolutions per minute. That is over 40,000 times smaller. And therefore, another myth goes down the drain. Sorry. We continued our vacation to New Zealand. We took a 2.5-hour flight on New Zealand Air to Christchurch. At Christchurch, we took a small commuter flight to Queenstown. In Queenstown, we stayed at the Novotel Hotel right on Lake Wakatipu. Queenstown is a small, rural city with a remarkable mountain range on one side and the third largest lake in New Zealand on the other. This is our room and it's okay. The next day, Bob and Leslie went on the Shotover jet boat ride. This boat travels at extreme speeds, winding through the tight Shotover River canyons. The boat weaves back and forth between the chasm walls, coming within inches of disaster. As you shoot through the narrow passages, your adrenaline is on high. This boat can make a high-speed 360-degree spin within the length of the boat. Leslie gives this ride 2 thumbs up. Bob and Leslie Keys now qualify for the coveted Thrill Seekers Certificate. Sue and I signed up for the Challenge whitewater rafting trip over the same river, but upstream 10 miles or so. We were supposed to take a helicopter ride to the rafting starting point, but all the helicopters were grounded from the high winds. We practiced the commands taught to us by our ex-Olympian guide, Malika. I was chosen to be the lead on the right side, and Sue had the left back position. The raft in front of us takes some time swimming before we hit the rapids. Up ahead, we approached the 170-yard Oxen Bridge Tunnel. Today, the rapids are running fast at stage 4 out of a possible 5. As we go through the very first rapid, called the Rock Gardens, we hit a rock that propels me out into the water. After the rescue, we're all ready to go again. Here we are going through Shark's Fin. Next is the toilet bowl, where we all manage to stay in. As you can see, we all have exhilarating smiles on our faces. Here we get knocked back and forth in pinball. Sue holds on for dear life as we get through again without losing anyone. The next day, we took an all-day trip to Milford Sound. We traveled south on a tour bus through Te Anu, the second most southern city in the world. Milford Sound is only 60 miles south of Queenstown, as a crow flies, but the only way on land is the 180-mile trip around Lake Wakatipu. We paused at the famous Mirror Lakes for a photo shot. There were literally thousands of cascading waterfalls on our trip to the Sound. Here's one that goes just underneath a small bridge that we can observe up close. The thundering sound and power of the water is just amazing as it flows down to meet up with the other streams. As you may have noticed before, the color of the water that flows in many of these streams is turquoise. This color comes from the very fine white powder that is mixed in with the water that comes from underneath the glaciers. This white powder is crushed rock from the tremendous weight of the glaciers. Our journey requires us to go through a very long, one-lane tunnel, a place where you do not want to break down, like the bus in front of us did on the way back, but that's another story. We finally arrived at Milford Sound and boarded a large ship for our luncheon cruise. As you might expect, this was another opportunity for Leslie and Sue to play Phase 10. Out on a large rock are some seals taking in the sun. There are several large waterfalls that pour out of the rocks down into the Sound. The boat makes its way to the ocean where the fresh water meets the salt water. The ride gets a little more rough here as we rock back and forth. Huge waves crash into the shore as the water splashes up 50 feet or more into the sky. As we turn around to head back, you can see the remarkable mountain range framing our spectacular view of the Sound. The mountains form directly out of the water, making sheer canyon walls. The beauty of the scenery here is like no other place in the world. That is one reason why Peter Jackson, director, producer, and writer of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, decided to film all 3 movies, Fellowship of the Rings, Two Towers, and The Return of the King, here in New Zealand. The pillars of the Aganath were superimposed on these canyon walls. Up ahead, the giant rock spike marks a perilous waterfall. Frodo and his companions make their way to Mordor with the concealed spiritual help from Strider. The Remarkables gets its name from its 2 largest peaks being directly due north and south. Quite remarkable. Our boat gets up close to this waterfall as you can feel the spray in the air. Instead of taking a 2-hour bus ride back to Queenstown, you can charter a fixed-wing plane for $245 or a helicopter for $450. Bob gets out on the upper deck to take some photos as we pass by one of the waterfalls. We decided to take the bus back, as you can hear Phase 10 in the background. The bus stops for more photo opportunities. This is Lake Watakapu, again, this time from the opposite side of Queenstown is on. The locals also know this lake as the Sleeping Giant. In the distance, and with enough imagination, you can see a giant lying on its back, sleeping. The next day, we leave Queenstown on a bus to Franz Josef. This ride is through the narrow, winding roads up in the mountains. Here we go over Ass Gate with the rushing glacier waters far below. The bus stops for us to get out for a closer look at Thunder Creek Falls. At this point, 6 of us from the bus tour take an optional jet boat river safari. We will travel downstream, actually north. This southern hemisphere thing is confusing, to the end of the river where it flows into the Tasmanian Ocean. This is around 30 miles on the boat, and we will meet up with our bus again for the remainder of the trip to Franz Josef. Our skipper was the first commissioned female jet boat driver in New Zealand. Just like the tour bus, we pull over for some photo shots. This stream is so clean and clear, you can drink it, and Sue does. Sue and I pose for another picture as we soak in the breathtaking scenery. Bob is getting low for that picturesque shot of Leslie. Back on the boat we go, and if anyone twirls his or her index finger, that signals the driver to do the 360-degree spin. The spin was a crowd pleaser, and she did it 5 or 6 times on our trip. We get back on the bus and arrive into Franz Josef around 5 p.m. After checking into our hotel, the ladies did laundry while the men took a hike up to Franz Josef Glacier. We hired Mike, the shuttle driver, to drop us off at the foot of the glacier. This glacier carved this canyon out thousands of years ago. This glacier has been retreating 1 yard per year for the last 100 years. The hike to the glacier is about 2 miles and takes us about 1 hour to walk. On our hike, we pass many waterfalls. Instead of paying a guide $50, Bob and I go for it alone. The path is easy to follow as we climb over large rocks. The glacier looks closer than it really is. At the top of the glacier, you can make out sheer ridges of ice sticking out of the snow. On our way to the glacier, we pass by the Continental Divide, a major fault in New Zealand. The hike requires climbing ladders, ropes, and traversing roaring streams. When we finally arrived at the base of the glacier, there were warning signs indicating that the ice may not hold your weight. Bob takes a self-portrait to remember the day that he hiked to the glacier. The leading face of the glacier is a sheer wall of ice, 50 feet tall. While I was taking pictures, I was very concerned about that 50-foot wall of ice falling on me. You can see huge chunks of ice that have fallen recently. Off to the right, there's a deep ice cave that goes back hundreds of feet. Up at the top of the wall of ice is a circular opening that grows each day as the ice melts. We take a piece of the glacier back in town so we can use the ice for our dinner drinks. This ice has not been water for thousands of years as we drank it in our iced tea. The next day, we took a bus trip from Franz Josef into Greymount on the west coast of the South Island of New Zealand. Here we waited for the Trans-Alpine Scenic Train to take us to the east coast. From Greymouth, we travel south to Arthur's Pass and continue on to Christchurch. The train makes 12 or so stops on its way and normally takes about 4 hours. However, today it was hot, and when the tracks are more than 40 degrees Celsius, that's 140 degrees Fahrenheit, federal law requires the train to go no faster than 25 miles per hour. This resulted in our trip taking an hour longer than normal. At the back of the train is one observation car for taking pictures of the scenery going by. However, in this case, to go by slowly. Fortunately, the weather cooled off and the train was allowed to go back to its normal speed. Outside is the glacial streams draining into the Pacific Ocean. Back in the main car, you can guess what Sue and Leslie are doing. After 5 hours, we finally arrive at the East Coast, where Christchurch is located. Our only night in Christchurch is at the Grand Chancellor Hotel. Due to a mix-up in our reservations for non-smoking rooms, Sue negotiated an upgrade to the penthouse suite. Philip, the night manager, also threw in a bottle of champagne for each room. Boy, did Philip treat us right. The next morning, we took a small plane on Origin Pacific, part of Qantas Airlines, to Rotorua on the North Island. This was the only airport that I can remember where you don't go through any type of security to get onto the plane. From the air, you can see many lakes, and Rotorua is on this lake. Our stay is at the Centra Hotel on the outskirts of town. The room was nice, and from our balcony you can view active geothermal geysers emitting the wonderful smell of sulfur.
Beautiful there, smells great, just no eggs for breakfast.
I was actually going to have some too.
From the hotel, we can take a free shuttle bus into town. Rotorua is a small tourist town on Lake Rotorua and is heavily populated with the native Maori people. When we want to ride back, we call the hotel from these free public red phone booths. The next day, we take a tour of the Te Whakare Thermal Reserve, right next door to our hotel. Maoris greet people by rubbing noses twice. Here's our guide.
The area here is called Te Whakare Tanga o Te Whetawa Wahio. That's your turn to say it.
This is the gathering place for the war parties. Wahaha. So it would be Ta Wahawa Ari Ua Iwa Ta Ochi A Pata Wa Iwa Waha. I may have butchered the pronunciation a bit, but heck, who can tell? This is the whakanu, the big house where women must not be seated in the front row, mainly so it's easier for the men to protect them from hostile guests. Outside are the geothermal springs that spew up hot water into the sky almost continuously. The smell of rotten eggs, hydrogen sulfide, is very strong here. Locals say it takes over 6 months before you get used to the smell. The mud from these pools is quite unique and is used for therapeutic healing. From the thermal reserves, we make a quick stop at Queen Victoria Gardens for some photos. Here are some ladies getting ready for a croquet match. We continue on to Rainbow Farm. This is like a mini zoo where they raise rainbow trout. As you can see, these are not your small trout. Here, we finally get to see the extremely rare and very protective native Kiwi bird. It is flightless and comes out only at night. New Zealand's nickname is after this bird and not the fruit. It doesn't take you long to figure out that New Zealand has more sheep than people. This is a demonstration of how sheepdogs herd the sheep. The dog's supposed to get all 3 sheep through the gate at the same time in under 3 minutes. The dog was tuckered out after this. Next was a sheep shearing demonstration. This was speeded up, but he finished it in less than 2 minutes. After the show, Sue and Leslie take a closer look at the various types of sheep. Bob and I sneak off to the Polynesian Spa for a hot soak in the pools and then a therapeutic mud massage administered by a Polynesian woman. That night, we all went to the Maori village for a hangai, a concert followed by an earth oven dinner. In order to visit a Maori tribe, the host tribe chief makes the welo, a challenge to the visiting chiefs. This is to establish if we are there as friend or foe. On our trip out to the village, the coach driver, who is a Maori warrior, goes through an extensive selection process to find a chief to represent all of the passengers. Somehow, I was selected. The Maoris are noted for their facial tattoos and their wagging tongues. This is all an attempt to scare their enemies, implying that they would taste good, since they are cannibals. Our meal that night was cooked in the ground, similar to a Hawaii luau, and it was very good. Just ask Leslie.
This is Chief Willemar from Canada, Chief Marcel from Switzerland, Chief Jim from Florida. Where are you from, Rex? The USA, and Neil from Australia, and Marcus from Manchester. Okay? Handsome gliders, aren't they?
At the end of the concert and feast, the chiefs were recognized and awarded a token.
Now, Chief, we have one final job for you. Have you guys heard of Hokey Tokey? You're going to dance? No. What you want to have to do, Chief, is please raise your right arm. This is the right arm, you. That's it, mate. Now, what you have to do, swing it to the right, swing it to the left, move it a bit faster and wave out to your tribes out there. Now, as you bring your arms down, bring them down slowly. Very much for a job well done. You may return.
The chiefs had first choice over everything. Everyone in my tribe, on my bus, had to wait for me and follow my lead. Being chief was not too bad. The next day we left Rotorua and headed off to Auckland, the north part of the North Island. On our way, we stopped in the town of Waitoma.
The dogs, and they're a special breed. They're specially bred to have big coats, and if they're not shorn 4 times a year, they are dead. They will die of heat stress.
Here we see genuine Angora rabbits being sheared. Next we enter the Waitoma Caves. Trickling water has formed caves, full of stalagmites and stalactites. The limestone deposits on these grow 1 inch per century. Thousands of glowworms have created an underground galaxy that attracts insects and tourists. The glowworm is unique to New Zealand. It is in the larva stage of a 2-winged insect that emits light to attract food in the form of other flying insects. These sticky feeding lines trap the insects and are drawn up and devoured. They remain in this larva stage for about 9 months, growing to 1 inch long. The light they emit is a bluish-green hue. The light is generated from a chemical reaction combining its waste products, ATP, and oxygen. Later that day, we arrive in Auckland. Auckland is the largest city in New Zealand. In fact, 1/3 of the country lives here, which is a city population of 1.2 million. Our room is at the luxurious Sky City Hotel. It turns out today is the Chinese New Year. The hotel lobby celebrates the New Year with a Chinese dragon demonstration with gymnasts and music. Again, there's a mix-up in our reservations, and now we know who we want to work it out for us. Sue, of course. She gets both of us another upgrade, and this suite is by far the largest of any we stayed on our vacation. Right next door to our hotel is the Sky City Tower, where you can do the Superman. This is where they harness you up and you leap off of a tall building. No thanks for me. Let's check this guy out. This is the last day of our vacation. It starts off with a city tour. This is the Harbour Bridge, also known as Nippon Clip-Ons, from the prefab bridge expansion project. This is Queen Street, Auckland's oldest conventional shopping street. The bus makes a stop at Auckland Gardens. These botanical gardens are out of this world. Here we are at the summit of Mount Eden for an expansive 360-degree view of the city below. This spot is also known as One Tree Hill. After the city tour, we visit Kelly Tarleton's Underwater Sea World. This is one of the largest aquariums in the world. Here you can view the sharks from the inside out. Bob and Sue are having fun with this manta ray swimming by.
Watch out, Bobby!
In this tank, there are hundreds of penguins. These are not the fairy ones like we saw at Phillips Island in Melbourne, but full-size ones. Just look how cute and colorful these birds are. After the aquarium, we visit the Auckland Harbor where the America's Cup is being competed. We board a sailboat, the Pride of Auckland, for a luncheon cruise and a tour of the America's Cup yachts in the harbor. This is one of the 3 yachts from the US of A, Oracle from San Francisco. Oracle tied for second place in the challengers bracket with another USA yacht from Seattle, One World. The third USA entry, Stars and Stripes from New York, finished near the bottom. The defending champions, New Zealand, are being interviewed for the upcoming finals against Switzerland. Here is the Linghai from Switzerland, the eventual winner. We sit back and relax after eating lunch for a little sailing in the harbor. Up goes the jib, and off we go sailing. Bob takes over the sailing duties first to get us safely out of the harbor. He focuses on the water like a pro. Here the Auckland Bridge is just ahead, and he does a magnificent job of avoiding it. Now Sue takes over and gives it a spin. She drives his boat like she drives her car. A sailboat from our port side nearly hits us, but Sue maneuvers to keep us afloat. Now it's my turn, and as you can see, I'm not quite as focused as either Bob or Sue. Up ahead I hit something and hope the skipper didn't notice.
So, we don't know where we are. We're lost in either the Pacific or the Tasman.
We are on the
Pacific
Pacific.
Ocean or the Tasman Sea. Wish us luck as we try to find our way back to America.
Well, we do find our way back to America by getting to the airport on time for a non-stop flight from Auckland to Los Angeles. This is our last day of our Aussie Kiwi vacation, and boy, was it a full day. In fact, it lasted 47 hours. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, as it turned out to be the best vacation of our lives. During our trip to Australia and New Zealand, Bob and I experienced 24 different beers, and this is our list in order of preference.